All right, so the videos that I posted online, no, it's okay. I had a problem. I didn't send it out there, but I had a problem with the audio, and it was distorted. And I figured it out. It was my video editor that was doing it. Okay, and so what I'm doing with that is I downloaded a different one, and I'm doing the saving part of it and then pop it up because I've had success before. They've worked, so. And I tried a different video editor this time. So, but so this week I want to talk about something that's come up a little bit around, and it's using. I'll just put this up here. So it's like this is a glaze here. So this is two glazes on this little pot here, and so what it does is the first one here, the base is eggplant. Right. Okay, and then the top one here with the other colors on here, this is the blue hydrangea.
And that's beautiful over eggplant.
Okay, and so in the blue hydrangea glaze, we can look at the bottom. You can see all the everything goes to the bottom. Right. So with these kind of glazes, they've got like their little crystals or gems, whatever you want to call them. Okay, you have to make sure that you take a stick and mix them up really well. Okay, to get them into suspension. Okay, and the other thing is with these here is that you have to treat those little specks as if they're little pieces of flux, because that's what they are. Okay, they will expand and open up a bit, but they'll also make everything around them run a little bit. And so when you apply them, we want to make sure they don't get applied any further down, vertically down the piece, and probably halfway to start till you figure out how much they run, and then maybe you can come 3/4 of the way down. Okay, but that's about it. Like, don't be really careful, because we're finding like we're getting into the pot where there's not so much here, but other people's pots and stuff where they're using these gems on this. It's running and it's putting glaze on the shelves, and then we got
mine is on a cookie.
The other thing I've read too is
he can just
once you've done it, to wipe off any of the little speckles that are on the bottom.
Yeah.
You don't pour in the pot, just you just take a soft, you scrub them off.
Yeah, just take them off the bottom. So you want to leave about I would say, like as a rule, if you go like as we know, we say with a second glaze, no further down than halfway until you figure out what it's doing. Mm-hmm. And then if you add a flux, it's down at the top, within the top third or less. And then the second glaze within the top half until you figure out what it does, and then you can move it into like 2/3 if it doesn't move too much. Okay, but with the gems and stuff like that, they should be within that top half. Okay, yeah. So otherwise they're gonna they'll pull stuff down. So yeah, see that one? Yeah. So here we got really close on, see this one here. So this one here is, you could never refire this because that's going to melt and it'll come right off. But see that if you feel that, it's got the bump on it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where when it hit the bisque at the bottom, okay, it started to build up. And so that's why it didn't run off, is because there was that bisque at the bottom. If we had glazed all the way to the bottom, this would have continued to run. Okay, because with glaze, what it does is when glaze runs down a pot, hi Kara, when glaze runs down a pot, we just it goes as far as it goes, and then if it hits biscuit, the bottom stops, and then remember, glaze acts like lava, so it flows from the top. So that buildup on that had to flow from the top, so it took time, and so it worked to hold it. So that's why we want to leave that rim at the bottom. And so again, that goes back to when we throw it and trim it. Yeah. So here we got this like bevel here at the bottom. So when we glaze it, we can come up and glaze to the edge of the bevel, and we've got this unglazed and the bottom unglazed, looking at that way. All right. So
if you don't like the look of the unglaze, can you paint it with underglaze that kind of matches the glaze?
Yeah. The other thing is, well, if you go back to trimming here, the unglazed, if you put a bit more of an angle on it, what it does is it pushes it underneath the pot and hides it. Okay. So like this one here, if you set this down here, with the shadow that's underneath it, you don't see it.
You don't really see it.
Okay, you only see it when you pick it up and look at the bottom. Okay, so yes, you don't see it, so it sits.
Angle.
That's what that angle is, and that's just like when you're trimming, you just come back with a 45 or a little bit steeper of an angle, a bit more underneath, so there's a good undercut. Okay, and then when you set it down, it's raised up, so it looks like it's sitting above. So like if you've got a countertop, if I use my book as a countertop, here like this, and we set this down on there, then there's that little shadow that goes around and you don't really see the undercut, okay? Whereas if you had something that was, this one didn't get trimmed, there's a little bit of a trim there, so you can see a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Okay.
can see where the stone.
But, because it doesn't have the same, when I did this, it didn't have the same distance, so it needs to be a bigger undercut on that one. And then, and the same thing here with like a plate. So here it's got a 45. So you put it down and then, so you can see where it come down. So we're gonna glaze down to where that line is, but below that, we're not gonna see it because it's out of the way. But that just goes right back to trimming it. So like in this pot here, see, there is no undercut on the side because this is one of Bert's that he did, it's out of a mold. And so see, there's no undercut on that. So then you get this white band at the bottom. Okay, that looks like that. And so then when you look at the piece and it looks like this.
Could you, I'm gonna try and use it on a plate. How would you do it on a plate?
Okay.
You do the eggplant, totally.
Yeah. So what we're going to do today is we made a plate and we made a vase or and a bowl. That's right. My bowl's over there. That's what it was. That's the vase. This is a different vase. So I'll go. We'll get a bowl. So we got a plate, a bowl, and a vase shape. Okay. And what I'd like to do is, I would like when you do them is each person pick a different combination of glazes. Okay, because you do it anyway, probably with what you've got and what we have here.
Sure.
But do the plate and the bowl and the vase all in that same combination. So everybody do a combination, okay? And then we'll take a look at it, make sure we don't go too far, but that'll give us an idea of how they react on a vertical surface and then on a bowl surface, which is slightly down, and on a flat surface.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we'll get that way here. We'll have an idea of what we have to do on a flat surface, which is the most difficult one to get special effects on, because we don't have the assistance of gravity. Okay, so you have to do a few things different on that, and it's just a placement and how you use flux and how you use a few other things. But it's just a way of doing stuff, looking at it that way. So that's what I want to do today is go through, and so we'll go through and do our stuff on our pots. We can grab those and take a look and see. Then we'll get those fired and we'll have something now. Yes.
Yeah, the mug I made with the 3 coats of the orange gems.
Yeah.
If I did used an underglaze and glazed it orange when it was green, and then put less of the gems, like just do 2, and do the last coat of the gems halfway down or something, that would be better, safer,
Yeah.
more controllable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll give it, because my son likes orange,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
No.
Now, if you like to, that's the other thing too with some of these glazes, like some of the ones we're using. There's a bunch of them that are opaque and that they're solid and you can't see through them. But some of them are semi-opaque, or we call them semi-translucent or translucent. So the gradation is transparent, like glass. You can see through it. So a transparent glaze is like our clears, okay? And then then the next category down is translucent, which is you can see light through it, but you can't, it's not too much. And then there's semi and semi on both sides of that. So there's semi-transparent, which is like cloudy, okay, but cloudy on purpose. Not cloudy like it's too thick, clear, okay? And then there's semi-translucent, which is a little darker yet. Then there's opaque, which is solid and there's no, if you held it up to the light, if it was a piece of glass and you held it up, you wouldn't see anything through it, okay? Or just a tiny little bit, but you can't see it. It's on the surface. It doesn't go down any further. So like this one here, if I look at that bowl. So we take a look at here, we've got a bowl here, okay, like that. So the pink on that would be opaque.
It's matte.
That's opaque, not matte.
All right. To me,
It's glossy. There's a gloss to it. It's not matte.
but you can't see through
Yeah.
it.
No, but that's an opaque color. Like you can't. It's there. You can put other colors on top of it, but you can't see through it. Like you can't. If you had speckled clay or brown clay, this would cover the brown clay,
Really, you wouldn't see both.
and you wouldn't see the brown clay so much. Okay, because it's an opaque glaze. All right, and then the other glazes on top, you can see through them a little bit, and so by looking down, depending on what they are, is they're a little more translucent, transparent. They're more translucent. Translucent on this is if you can see through them and still see their color. They're not picking up the color on the bottom. Okay, and then a transparent glaze on the top of this, you would see that color, but you'd also see some of the color from below coming through, okay, on those. And so you can get into ones like, get on this type of thing here. So here you've got the glaze here, which is this one is the winter wood. No?
It's the other one.
The sandstone. Okay, and then this is the orange. Here is the
Raspberry
raspberry mist, and so then you can see the dark spots in the sandstone. You can see that through the raspberry mist. So the raspberry mist is more of a transparent color, so you can see what's underneath coming through. And so,
Flux on it then, right?
and then flux at the top to pull it and make it run and stuff. But what you can also do then is, if you're thinking of that way, is you can put a glaze down that's got some color, and then put another transparent glaze on the top that also has some color, but it'll also bring through from the bottom, which will give you another layer of color. Okay, and depending on the thickness and stuff like that, so you can get variations of color. A lot of times is the ones you put on top will sometimes mute the bottom and down a little bit, which is sometimes good. Like if you've got a really strong color at the base and you just want to have one that's coming through a little bit more, and then you can build layers. So it's like painting when you're doing layers of oil on an oil painting, so you see depth. Okay, so you would dark colors at the back coming to light colors. Well, we can go dark colors in glaze, and then the kind of glaze, bringing them back up through the spectrum, so that when we look down through the glaze, we can see layers in the glaze, either for color or for striations or for whatever we want to make to do that. So if I'm making a glaze, one that works like that is called floating blue as one, and what that is there, it's a glaze that separates itself into layers after it melts, because the glaze itself has got ingredients in it that sort of migrate. Remember back in the 70s we had a dessert called Jello, and it was, and then we could get the ones that we could do layered ones. We have, and you mix it all up together and you put it in. It all separates out.
It was
Okay,
good, too.
so some glazes are like that. So you mix it all up together and you fire them, and they'll
Jello
separate
1, 2,
out.
3.
Yeah, Jello 1, 2, 3. Yeah, remember. So that's what it's doing, and so
No, I'm old enough.
yeah.
Just your mother didn't buy crap.
Mine did too.
Mine bought all that
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
I remember Jello, but not 1, 2, 3.
No? Okay. Well, what it was is it was the darker, was the clear Jello at the bottom, and then a Jello with foam in the middle, and then just a foamy on top, and there's 3 colors.
Yeah, it was called Jello 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, you can also make it with whipped cream too if you want, like a Cool Whip or
can buy
whatever.
something with
So,
that.
but it was one that came all together. You mixed it all at once, and then it would separate, just like buying a rainbow drink type thing where it's all separated in colors, except those are separated individually and not mixed together, and they don't just,
Oh, a rainbow drink?
okay, they don't form them
I
themselves.
don't know
But
any of that. The only mixed drink I've ever had is margaritas.
okay, no problem. So anyways, looking at that, then we've got that kind of thing. So this floating blue glaze, so what it does is that it has some ingredients in it that in such that they'll go to the bottom of the glaze layer. If you can imagine, we'll expand that glaze layer out, that layer of glaze, those 3 coats or that dip that we put on there. And so after it melts, it separates into about 3 or 4 different layers. And then when you look down through it, as you're looking down through those different layers, your eyes perceive it as a different effect. So what we call that glaze a hare's fur. If you've ever petted a cat, you know how the light plays on a cat's fur, how or a rabbit, like a gray rabbit, how that kind of a thing. So that's the kind of effect, the visual effect that you get looking down through a floating blue. So it's almost clear at the top, going down into blue with a little bit of brown striations in it with a dark blue base. Okay, so it's a nice down depth type of thing. So and that was all single glaze that did that. But here we can do something similar to that by combining some glazes. And it's just that we have to be careful that if they have crystals in them, and some glazes like the winterwood and the sandstone, they are what those are is they are the stuff that pops that makes the brown.
Right.
Okay, is iron oxides. It's an iron oxide or an ilmenite, which is another form of iron oxide. And so that gives you that brown pop. but they don't run by themselves. Okay, so if you just had that glaze on,
They would
then
just
that
look
glaze, you could run all the way to your line at the bottom and you wouldn't have a problem.
But it's pretty.
Okay, it's when you add, like say, what they call jungle gems or crystalline glazes, or some of the other ones where they've got all those other colors and crystals in them that pop color. When you add those together, they will sometimes run, and especially if you're using a flux, because it'll just make everything go. Okay, so it's just a matter, we just have to be careful how we apply it. And it goes right back down to testing and keeping notes and remembering, okay, well, if I put winter wood on here, I know I can come down to the bottom and be fine. I don't have to worry about wiping that one back because it's good. The same with the sandstone, because it's not going to move. They're very stable glazes. They don't go anywhere, but when you add another glaze on the top of them, okay, that's when you start to build layers, and that's what's going to pull, okay, because that's what it does. So it'll pull those glazes underneath, because it's more liquid on the top, and so then they may slide down and off the pot. So that's where you have to watch how you're applying your upper level glazes and stuff in your order. Okay, so looking at that stuff. Yeah, so again, when you get your pieces like here, remember we're going to take a pot like this, we'll get some water and a sponge, and you just want to take and make sure that you've got it all wiped off so you can get all the dust off of it. Okay. Anybody that says there's no dust on them, you do this for a whole class and your water turns white. Okay, so then you just lightly dust it off like that, so then it's good to go. And then you can put your colors on.
Where do you put your flux then?
Well, we just wait. We're gonna, like say here, the same thing the fluxes, which is to keep to the rims.
Yeah, I understand them, and I just don't understand the plates.
Well, that's the idea, is we're gonna do them on the rims to start
Okay,
with.
You're gonna do them.
You're gonna do, like we're gonna do them on the rims. Okay, so then you can see how much that moves. And then what we can do to get, like say you've got like here, this one here, this remember was the one we did last week.
Yeah, that's
So it's got a black inside, and then the outside is alabaster on the bottom, all the way to the top. So this is our 2 coats of alabaster. And then we put 2 coats in the top. I did the width of a brush.
Right.
And actually it was this brush here, so that much there, so that's the top 1/3. Okay, so the top third right there, that was green tea. Okay, so here that green tea moved 2/3, like two brush lengths. That's where it was applied, and that's where I did that. And then I added just around the rim, just here at the very top, I just took my brush with a little bit of flux in it like this, and I just went here like this and just built the flux up on the rim all the way around. And so one layer of flux.
Wow.
Of light flux here. So then the flux, it made that's what made this shiny. But if you look at the bottom down here below it, I didn't do the flux even. Okay, I did it like as I put it around, there were some gaps, which is fine because then that gives me gaps here how it runs. So the flux moves down like this, and you can see it's shiny, and it comes all the way down through the alabaster, and so that's when we get our drops. That's the flux that's pulling the green tea down through the alabaster. Okay, but where the flux wasn't, then you get this little bit of a ring here, and you can see underneath back in these sections here where it's down, that's just the green tea on the alabaster. So I know the green tea came down the double length. We'll just pass that around, you can take a look at it. So the green tea, you can see it underneath the flux in the gaps.
So there's more flux in this area where this is coming down, right?
Yes,
And less here.
Yeah.
And more here.
And it changed the color of the green tea.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, taking a look with that, and then on the inside is just the Celadon black, okay, which is my version of Amico's obsidian,
This is from the green tea running?
that's the flux
That's the flux.
that's the flux that's pulling. The green tea is the color, so the green that you get, and then the alabaster is a fairly stable glaze. And so it was stopping the flux, and so the flux sort of got underneath the alabaster
Oh, I
and
get it.
lifted it up a little
Yeah,
bit.
okay, I see. That's
Yeah,
pretty.
It is nice. It's the nicest thing I've seen so far. Out of all of these.
That's the other thing too we think about is all of these glazes, we're doing the Mako commercial glazes, okay? But my experience and stuff has been with glazes that I've made or studio glazes and done the same kind of things to get type of thing. So That one there looks really nice because it's simple. There's just two colors and a little bit of flux on it. All right, so sometimes you want to take a look at it and think, okay, when you're glazing something, okay, we can put a whole bunch of glaze on it,
It's gonna be ugly.
and I mean, like, too much of a good thing, okay? Okay, and whereas something like this, it's a little more simple, and I like to use the phrase less is more.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's less busy, so it gives your eye something to look at and take in and see all the differences and the nuances and the textures, and you can see how the alabaster is coming through here on the green tea, and how it sort of like it makes it look kind of sparkle down here where it breaks apart and it comes down. So it's interesting, okay? Whereas sometimes there's too much interest here, like my eye just goes everywhere
Yeah.
on these. Like here, like it is, right? They're great learning tools. Like that's the only way we're going to learn is to do it. And you can see, okay, so then you can see, well, this combination, even the sandstone by itself on the inside, okay, is nice. But I mean, like there's an awful lot going on in there, right? All right. So maybe what you can do with this one here of the sandstone is put it as a single coat for its color abilities and stuff over top of a coat or two of something else, like an alabaster or a white or something like that, or put it underneath a couple coats of white to tone it down a little bit.
Is that just, sorry, can I?
Sure,
is
sure.
that just sandstone like that?
That's just
They're
sandstone.
How
sandstone.
many coats of,
Two.
Two coats,
of sandstone? I really like that.
This is what,
I thought you said three.
maybe 3 coats.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 coats.
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It is.
So
very
it's really
cool.
stable then.
You could.
Yeah. So sandstone, it's a very stable glaze. Okay. So that's the 3.
The other whiter one, it's the same kind of glaze, it's very stable.
Mm-hmm.
I find some of the busy glazes like that, just my preference, I prefer when you do a complementary color.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
You know, so if it would have been done with a black, or like you were saying, a
That's
white
right.
or a cream tone or something, as opposed to a contrasting color, because it's like there's too much going on then, because you've got the contrasting, whereas,
I did the pink.
you know, some of the more solid colors, sometimes a contrast is nice, but.
Yeah. Again, that goes back to we haven't done a lot of that, but it takes me back to art classes when you learn color theory. Okay, and it's that kind of an idea.
Yeah, complementary colors,
Yeah,
precisely.
yeah, contrasting and complementary, like the two of them. So then it's just a matter of the only way to do it with glaze is to put it on a pot and fire it, because that's you know we it's not like we can squeeze it out of a tube and that's going to be the color that it's going to be when it's done, like an acrylic paint. Like we can see what it's going to look like as we put it on the canvas or on the pot or whatever, looking at that way. But here we're building up layers, and we want to see, and then they all interact with each other, because you know, as well as I do, that glaze A plus glaze B is equal to glaze C, okay? Because it creates a new color, a new texture, a new kind of glaze. Some of them will go flat and matte, some of them will go shiny and run. There'll be all sorts of different things you can do. What happens when 2 glazes mix? Okay, because then you've got the ingredients out of 1 mixing with the ingredients out of 2, and so then you're getting a third. But if you mixed those 2 glazes up in the liquid form together to start with, it wouldn't look the same, because it needs that layering. It needs that you know, the definition of layers. Just like when we have like our studio glazes, if you like an effect that you get when you put 2 glazes together, if you mix both of those glazes together in a bucket and glaze them on, it wouldn't look like that. It's probably going to come out kind of muddy.
Yeah.
Okay, so I tried that before. It worked. Now there's there's always an exception. Okay, to that there is one. It's called a fake chino,
Okay.
but the only way to make a fake chino is that and the chino glaze is a cone 10 style glaze.
Yep.
That was used in China, and it was really popular. And the chino glazes, they are typically a darker, semi-transparent that had sometimes they had looks like gold dust in them, and it was just really a nice deep kind of a glaze. It's like a dark celadon type of thing that was sort of transparent to semi-transparent, But the Chinos, they trapped the carbon from the firing, and so then that reacted with the things. That's one of the things with Chino glazes.
That's why they break.
Yeah,
So they all break so
yeah,
quickly.
that's how they break.
It's always the iron oxide that they break with.
But it only works, a Chino glaze only works in a cone 10 firing, or in a gas cone 10, or a wood kiln cone 10.
Ours do.
Not so much, well, they're not true Chinos, okay?
Obviously.
The ones that are here, we make a Chino glaze that will fire in 6,
Yeah.
but it's a fake Chino,
Yeah, okay.
okay? And there is a way of making a fake Chino where you take 2/3 of one liquid and add 1/3 of another one in the same bucket and put it on, and it works really well. But it looks a lot like the Chino. It's like adding Chino white and Chino brown, and so you get like a nutmeggy kind of color that works really well. So there's a couple that you can do that with, but for the most part, if you mix your liquid glazes together, you're not going to get the same effect as if you've dipped one and then the other, or brushed one and then the other, that type of thing there. So, and it's the layer that's in between that reacts, and so you have a base glaze, and then as it comes up in the layer, so the layer of the base glaze and then the layer of the top glaze on top, where those two interact, that's when you're going to get your mixing and your different glazes there forming, and then your other one on top, and it'll just depend on what they both are as far as how much they move, how much they change, how much they meld into each other. You get into all sorts of things, like depends on the flux ratio and the amount of alumina that's in the base glaze versus the top one, and how much it'll blend in together or be sort of like a barrier type thing. So there's some, the reasons that they do it, we can figure them out chemically. Okay, from a chemical analysis point of view, we can duplicate them that way or create them. But for the most part, we don't get into that stuff, because this is more glaze application and figuring out with all the things made versus making glazes. I did a glaze class, two sessions here on starting at the bottom to create a glaze, or to make a studio glaze, and the chemistry that's behind all of that, and how you can formulate your ingredients, how you can mix them together to create a certain effect or a certain kind of glaze, or a certain hardness or a gloss or whatever you want to do, and how we manipulate the materials to do that. And so there's the science that's behind it, but this is the art part here, which is where we have the glaze created, and then we're just adding them together to see what happens. And taking notes, and so we want to duplicate them, then we can go from there. All right? Good. All right, so that's all I want to talk about today, is just basically really watch out when you've got those crystals. Make sure they're mixed up really well in the pot, in there first, and then when you put them on, initially until you figure out what they're going to do, let's keep them above the halfway line, okay, coming down the pot. And then once we figure out what they're doing, and then when you know what they're doing, then you can bring them down to like 2/3 of the way down. But I wouldn't go much more than 2/3 on anything, just because of it'll depend on, we can say crystals in general for the additions, but then it'll depend on what base glaze it's mixed into, because some of them are more fluid than others. All right, and so like just as a general rule of thumb, that's why the top 1/3 and top 1/2 and top 2/3, those are just the general rules. And then once you figure out what a glaze is doing, how much it's going to move in that combination, then you can adjust that, okay? But it's really just experience and a bit of firing and trial, and we got to do the testing. Yeah. Okay, anybody have any questions?
No, we're planning to do plates though. How are we going to do plates?
Okay, so with a plate, we're going to take, let's say we're going to do a plate in this color here. So I'm going to do alabaster and I'm going to go green tea.
Okay, so you do 2 coats.
Okay,
of
so
all.
2 coats of alabaster and then 2 coats of green tea. Okay, and that will give me the color that's in the middle in here. Should.
So how much green tea do you put?
That's 2 coats.
No, but
So
I
you
mean,
can do the whole plate.
the whole
Yeah,
plate twice.
do the whole plate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not going
It's not going anywhere. Okay, it will move a little bit. Okay, on the inside. Outside, I would put alabaster from my line, from the line down here up, would be alabaster, and maybe just like that top.
But what if you, What if you had a sparkly one? The second glaze was the spark. Let's say you had the purple, the eggplant, and then you did the passion flower. How would you do that?
Okay, on the inside, you can
Yeah.
do whatever you want.
But I'm just saying, how would you do it so it would look good? I
Okay,
don't want it to look.
all right, so
You want it
for
to look
here,
like
we'll
that.
go with our 2 coats of eggplant,
Eh.
okay?
Yeah.
And then 2 coats of your
Just on top.
on top,
Oh,
okay?
that's it.
Because the inside of a piece is,
It can run all it wants.
yeah, it'll pool down. We just don't want it to pool too much.
Yeah.
But it'll run. But what's going to happen with this is it's going to run down the sides, and then you'll see there'll be a little bit of a run that we see. These runs that we talk about are these, like our runs,
And I wouldn't do it on
like
the
here,
outside.
running like that, versus it's going to be more of just a mixing of the 2 glazes. Okay, so take a look that way.
That's great.
And then, but say you wanted to duplicate this effect here, okay, on a plate.
We'd have to flux.
Okay, then what you could do is what you would take is your flux, and then your flux, you would actually paint a line of flux down and a line of flux down, and maybe do a little swirl of flux in the center, okay, just to make it move, because you've got no gravity to
Right.
pull.
Okay.
Okay, so you've got a flat surface, so it's just gonna come down and melt, all right? So your flux, if you just did a line of flux coming out a straight line, your flux is probably gonna move the width of that. Okay, so it's gonna go that wide, probably, okay? That's probably all you're gonna get is that much there from a line
If you did the alabaster in that.
and the green tea.
Right.
Even if you don't, if you, whatever your flux is, it doesn't matter what your base
But
is,
even if the top part had the sparkles,
yeah,
won't they just do stuff by themselves?
they will.
But the flux would add to it.
Yeah, if you want the flux will pull and move stuff around, right?
Okay.
So it just depends. Think of it as a blending tool. The flux is a blender.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So
Makes sense. That's
Alright.
blue hydrangea.
yeah,
That's with flux.
yeah. So if you have 2 glazes and you put them together, okay, like here,
That's 4 coats then.
yes,
Okay.
2 of each.
All right.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
then
And
the
then,
outside of the
The
plate?
outside just plain.
then the outside of the plate here, what I would do with that is I would do for the outside, because this is just a shallow plate, I wouldn't do the flux on the outside.
Well, I would just do
And
2
so
coats, that's it.
2 coats of the alabaster, and then the top would be like the on this one here, the top third would be like the width of my
Yeah.
baby finger's nail. Okay, just that much as the top, and I
Right.
might do 2 coats of that, and that's gonna pretty well pull almost all the way down to the bottom. And then I'm gonna trust that since there's no glaze on the beveled line down here, that'll stop anything from going any further.
Yeah, you don't want.
Okay, so yeah, for this one here, that would be just those 2, and that'd give you that combination color on the outside. But on the inside, you can do what you want. Same with the inside of a bowl. Okay, again, it's
You do what you want.
do what you want, but again, remember what you're doing and how it's gonna look, and is it gonna be too busy? Like, usually when you're creating a plate or a bowl, it's because you're gonna put food in it, okay? And so we can make plates that compete with the food, so the plate looks better than what you put in it, okay?
It's like
Or,
Mama's tree.
depends on what you wanna use it for, right? So if you want the place setting to look great before you put the food on it, or if you want the food to complement, or the plate to elevate the food. Okay, so it's just a way of deciding what you want the purpose of your item to do. Okay?